The rain was my only companion as I drove south from Pittsburgh. Its soft patter on my Subaru's windshield, a rhythm I could lose myself in. My name's Sarah Mitchell, and at 30, I was running from a life that had crumbled like wet paper. Mark and I had been married for 6 years, but the last 2 were a slow bleed arguments over bills, silences that stretched into days, and finally, his affair. The divorce papers were signed a month ago, leaving me with an apartment that echoed with his absence. I needed to get away, to find something solid in a world that felt like it was dissolving. So, I rented a cabin in the Monongahela National Forest, near Spruce Knob, West Virginia's highest peak. I'd always found solace in photography, capturing moments that didn't slip away, and the mountains promised moody landscapes to heal my fractured soul. The drive was long, the city's concrete giving way to rolling hills, then dense forests where spruce and hemlock stood like silent giants. My GPS flickered as I entered the forest, the signal weakening with every mile. By the time I reached Seneca Rocks, a tiny town dwarfed by jagged cliffs, the rain had thickened, blurring the world outside. I met Amos, the rental agent, at a gas station with a flickering neon sign. He was wiry, his face carved by years of mountain wind, and his eyes held a wariness I didn't understand. "Cabin's up in the holler," he said, handing me a rusted key. "Stay on the paths, miss. That place. It talks sometimes." I smiled, assuming he was spinning local color for the city girl. I was here for photos, not folklore. The road to the cabin was a muddy scar through the forest, barely wide enough for my car. Ferns brushed the fenders, and the spruce trees loomed, their needles glistening in the rain. The cabin appeared through the fog, a small cedar-sided structure with a sagging porch and windows like empty eyes. I parked, unloaded my gear camera, tripod, a duffel of clothes, and stepped inside. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of old wood and something metallic, like blood or rust. A stone fireplace dominated the living room, its hearth stained black, and a single bulb hung from the ceiling, casting weak light. I started a fire, the crackle a small comfort, and set up my camera on the porch for a time-lapse of the fog rolling through the holler, a narrow valley cradled by mountains, where the mist seemed to breathe. That first night, I sat with a mug of coffee, watching the fog swirl like a living thing. The forest was silent, unnaturally so. No owls, no crickets, just the rain's faint trip. Then I heard it, a whisper, soft as a breath, curling through the trees. Sarah, my name, or something close, woven into the wind. I froze, coffee sloshing in my mug. The holler was empty, the nearest neighbor miles away. I stepped onto the porch, scanning the darkness, but saw only fog and spruce. My camera kept recording, its red light steady. When I played the footage later, my heart sank. In one frame, the fog parted, revealing a shadow tall, thin, moving too smoothly to be human. It vanished in the next frame, leaving me staring at an empty holler, my name still echoing in my mind. Morning brought no relief. The fog was thicker, a gray curtain that swallowed the trees 10 feet from the cabin. I needed to clear my head, so I grabbed my Nikon and headed into the holler, hoping to capture the forest's eerie beauty. The path was narrow, carpeted with spruce needles that muffled my steps. The air was cold, heavy with the scent of wet earth and pine, and the silence pressed against me like a physical weight. I snapped photos, twisted roots, lichen-covered rocks, a stream that gurgled like it was whispering secrets. But the holler felt wrong, like it was watching me, waiting for a misstep. About a half-mile in, I found a clearing where the ground was soft, sunken, as if it had been dug up and filled in. Old tools, an axe, a saw, a pickaxe jutted from the dirt like gravestones. Their handles were etched with carvings, spirals, jagged lines, symbols that didn't match any Appalachian folk art I'd researched. I knelt to photograph them, my breath catching as my fingers brushed the axe. A chill shot through me, sharp and sudden, like I'd touched ice. The whispers came again, clearer now. Stay? Hours. I spun around, heart pounding, but the clearing was empty, the fog tightening like a noose. I hurried back to the cabin, my boots slipping on wet rocks. Inside, I uploaded the photos to my laptop, hoping to distract myself. Most were as expected moody, gray, perfect for my portfolio. But one image stopped me cold. In the clearing, where I'd been alone, a blurry shape stood behind a spruce tree, humanoid but wrong, its edges smudged like wet charcoal. I zoomed in, but the pixels warped, refusing to focus. My hands shook as I closed the laptop, telling myself it was a glitch, a shadow, anything but what it seemed. That afternoon, I drove back to Seneca Rocks, needing human contact to ground me. Amos was at the gas station, polishing a counter that didn't need it. I mentioned the whispers, expecting a chuckle. Instead, his face hardened. "That holler's got a history," he said, voice low. Back in the 1820s, a logging camp sat there. Crew came in, cut in deeper than they should have. Started hearing voices' names, please. Then they vanished, all of them, overnight. Folks say they woke something in the forest, something that don't like being disturbed. He leaned closer, eyes sharp. "You hear your name, don't answer. It ain't callin' to be kind." His words followed me back to the cabin, heavy as the fog. I tried to work, editing photos by the fire, but the whispers returned at dusk, louder, more insistent. "Sarah, come." They weren't in my head anymore. They were outside, drifting from the holler. I locked the door, checked the windows, and piled more wood on the fire. But the cabin felt smaller, the walls thinner. My camera, left on the porch, started recording on its own. The footage showed the fog swirling into shapes, faces, hands, eyes before dissolving. I yanked the cable out, but the whispers didn't stop. They were in the wind, in the creak of the floorboards, in the fire's hiss. By the third day, I was fraying at the edges. The holler's silence was louder than Pittsburgh's traffic, a quiet that screamed. I found more tools in the yard, half buried, their carvings glowing faintly in the twilight. My phone had no signal, despite working fine in Seneca Rocks. I called Amos from the cabin's landline, but the line crackled and died, a voice whispering hours before it cut out. I felt trapped, the holler's grip tightening with every hour. I needed answers, so I drove to a small library in Elkins, a town 30 miles away. The librarian, a woman named Ruth with gray hair and kind eyes, listened as I described the tools and whispers. She pulled a dusty book from the archives, Monongahela Tales, self-published by a local historian in the 1970s. It mentioned the logging camp, built in 1823 by a company from Philadelphia. The workers ignored warnings from local Cherokee, who said the holler was sacred, a place where the earth's spirits slept. The loggers cut deeper, felling ancient spruce until the whispers started. One night, the camp went silent. Searchers found only tools, scattered like offerings, and carvings no one could read. Ruth's voice softened. "Some say it's the land itself, protectin' what's left. You be careful, Sarah. That holler don't forget." I thanked her, my mind racing. Back at the cabin, the whispers turned personal. "Sarah, you left him?" They knew about Mark, our fights, his betrayal, my guilt for walking away. I shouted into the fog, "Leave me alone." But my voice echoed back, twisted, mocking. The holler was peeling me open, layer by layer. That night, my camera malfunctioned again. The screen flickered, showing images I hadn't taken. The clearing, the tools, and a figure tall, thin, with no face, just a void where eyes should be. It stood closer in each frame, until it was outside the cabin's window. I yanked the battery out, heart racing, but the whispers were inside now, in the walls, in the fire's crackle. Hours forever. I curled up by the hearth, clutching a kitchen knife, sleep a distant dream. Desperate for help, I hiked to a nearby farm the next morning, hoping to find someone with answers. The fog was relentless, turning the path into a maze of shadows. The farm belonged to a man named Eli, a retired logger Amos had mentioned. His house was weathered, surrounded by rusted machinery, and he sat on the porch, whittling a piece of spruce. His eyes narrowed when I mentioned the whispers. "You're stayin' in that holler?" he said, setting the knife down. "Should have left day one." Eli told me more about the logging camp. The company had pushed the workers hard, cutting sacred trees despite warnings. The Cherokee elder who tried to stop them vanished, and the whispers started soon after. "It's the forest's guardian," Eli said. "It don't just kill, it claims. Takes your name, your guilt, makes you part of it." He handed me a carved pendant, a spiral like the ones on the tools. "Wear this, might keep it at bay." I thanked him, skeptical but desperate, and tucked the pendant in my pocket. Back at the cabin, the whispers were a chorus now, names mixing with mine: Elijah, Mary, Thomas loggers, I assumed, trapped by whatever I'd woken. The pendant felt warm against my skin, but it didn't stop the fog from creeping closer, the trees from leaning in. That night, I found scratches on the cabin's door, spirals and lines etched deep. My camera recorded again, unplugged, showing the figure at the window, its void face inches from the glass. I screamed, dropping the camera, and the whispers laughed. I couldn't stay another night. The holler was alive, its pulse in the whispers, the fog, the carvings. I packed my bag, planning to leave at dawn, but the keys were gone, vanished from the table. The fog was so thick I couldn't see my car, and the whispers were relentless. "Sarah." "Stay." I grabbed my flashlight, the pendant, and my camera, useless but familiar, and headed into the holler. I had to face it, to end it, or I'd never leave. The path to the clearing was different, the trees closer, their branches clawing at my jacket. The air smelled of decay, sharp and sour, and the fog pulsed like a heartbeat. The whispers guided me, a cacophony of voices, angry, pleading, sad. My flashlight flickered, casting shadows that moved on their own. The clearing was different too, the tools gone, replaced by a crude altar of stones and branches, the carvings glowing faintly. The figure stood there, tall and faceless, its body a patchwork of bark and shadow rooted to the earth. It didn't move, but I felt its gaze, ancient and heavy, like the mountains themselves. The whispers surged. "You took. You broke. You stay." I saw flashes, loggers swinging axes, trees bleeding sap, a Cherokee elder falling to his knees. The holler wasn't just haunted. It was angry, violated, claiming those who trespassed. My guilt mark, the divorce, my failure fed it, pulling me into its grasp. I dropped to my knees, tearing at the altar, scattering stones and snapping branches. The figure shrieked, a sound like wind through a broken flute, and the fog closed in, thick as water. My flashlight died, and the whispers became screams, names I didn't know mixed with mine. I clawed at the earth, blood mixing with dirt, until the altar was gone. The screams stopped, the fog lifted, and the figure vanished. The holler was silent, the air light again. I stumbled back to the cabin, legs shaking, the pendant burning against my chest. My keys were on the table, my car untouched. I drove out at dawn, the forest watching but silent. In Pittsburgh, I tried to rebuild new apartment, new clients, but the holler followed me. My mirrors showed scratches, spirals etched into the glass. My camera captured shadows in every frame, shapes that moved when I wasn't looking. I sold it, but the whispers lingered in my dreams, faint but persistent. Sarah. Ours? I don't go into the woods anymore. The holler knows my name, and I'm afraid it's still waiting.